Emily, we're back in the basement, the dungeon, the Deconstruction Zone.
We love it. We shouldn't have told people it's a basement. We should have been like, yeah, we have this really nice studio that we like bought out.
Yeah, let's start
Lying
over
is
again.
good.
Hey, Emily, welcome to the Deconstruction Zone. We're in the studio. We rented this sucker out. Welcome to it.
For millions of dollars.
We're holding it down.
Thanks to your Patreon subscriptions.
Hey, what are we talking about today?
Okay, I want to talk about a musical today.
Oh, okay. I like musicals.
I guess we started a few weeks ago. We talked about a musical too, but who cares?
Yeah, we're here.
Have you heard of the musical Godspell?
Oh, I think I have.
Okay, it was written in the 70s about Jesus.
Okay.
And honestly, I have just been vibing so hard with it this week, and it has brought a lot of thoughts, and it's honestly made me like really vibe with Jesus this week.
Okay. I'm going to Google it while you tell me more. I want to know more about it.
So, well, I want to just go through a few different songs and say like how that helped me.
Okay.
Like what that has shown to me.
Before you get into it, well, I like the soundtrack if I just throw it out of my car.
Like's a strong word. I think it's interesting. I think it's catchy mostly, but I'm also a musical theater person.
Okay. I'm digging it. All right. Tell me about it.
Okay. So the first song, I'm not going to go through each song, but the first song is called The Tower of Babel, but like Babel, like Babble.
Sure.
And it's all, this is so dope. It's all these different philosophers like talking to Jesus, but then they like keep talking like, and it just gets louder and louder and more chaotic. And I was like, no song has ever been a more accurate description of like my brain when I think about Christianity.
Yeah.
Like the first one is like Socrates, and it's like, I honor and love you, but I will never cease the practice of philosophy. And then another one is like, I don't know. It's just like a bunch of different thoughts from a bunch of different people, and it's just all getting jumbled up. And I was like, yes. And then it goes into the second song. I'm really not going to go through each song.
Well, it remains to be seen.
It goes into the second song with like one note like stays throughout.
Okay.
And then it's like, prepare ye the way of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this like, it just made me think about this idea of like a voice crying in the wilderness. And it helped me see the wilderness. Because I always thought of like, whenever I heard that phrase, I was always like, yeah, because it was like kind of wild out there in Galilee or whatever. But like the wilderness being intellectual wilderness, like that song, that first song feels like wilderness. It feels like everything's crazy and you like don't know how to navigate it. And everyone's saying things that are like, these are all great points, but when you guys are all saying it at the same time, it makes me panic. And so then I was just thinking about like, but then this is the third song, I think. I think it's the fourth song. I'm actually going to skip that. So then the end of Act 1 is a song called Beautiful City. And it's Jesus singing, the Jesus.
The Jesus.
And it's like, we can build a beautiful city, not a city of angels, but we can build a city of men. And that was like a way of saying, I think that musical is way more powerful, like if you really know scripture, because I was like connecting it a lot. I was like, oh, like that, he always says like the kingdom of God is at hand, or like the kingdom of heaven is here. But to hear it said that way of like Jesus' point was saying like we can make something beautiful now.
Yeah.
And I think we've said that before, but for some reason that just like really hit it home for me. And so, real talk, I'm not like, back like woohoo, but I'm really vibing with Jesus. Like if right now as like a rabbi or like some like what he said was like pretty hardcore. And honestly, for the past few months, I've just been like, you know how we talked about the divorce and we were like, this is like a big monologue at the beginning, but like, you know how we talked about the divorce, how you were like, you're divorcing religion or the church or whatever, but like Jesus is like the kid in the divorce. And I was like, but the kid reminds you of your ex-wife. And so like, that's where I was at with Jesus for a while. Like, I just was like, I don't want to look at my kid.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I feel like I'm just getting back into a space. In a lot of ways, I feel like a theme currently in the podcast is me like being more refreshed and able to process things again.
Yeah.
But specifically, I was like, oh my God, like Jesus said some cool shit.
Yeah, I would second that.
Yeah.
So listening to this, like you said, it's been really cool for you. Like, did you seek out this because you're like, hey, this could be like, how did you re-engage it? I think you've heard it before, but like, what brought it back into your sphere?
My siblings have been in the musical, so that was my first experience of it a few years ago.
Did Westminster just put it on not long ago?
A few years ago.
I went to it. That's why I know this one.
Oh my God, that was before I knew you.
That's really funny.
Wild.
I was like, why do I know this? Yeah, Annie and I went to it in the black box. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty cool.
It was really good. Yeah.
The night I was there, I got like pulled on stage to do something.
Oh, that's really fun. I wonder if you were there.
Wow. I'm sure our paths crossed before.
That's so funny.
Anyway. So I had heard of it, and then I was hanging out with, so my boyfriend's also a teacher, and I was hanging out with him and some of his colleagues who like run the musical at their high school, and they were like, what musical should we do? And one of them was like, maybe Godspell. And I was like, oh, I'm like thinking about that. And then I just kind of put it on casually, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, they are tapped. Stephen, whatever his name is, who wrote it, is tapped into something really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting, like, in terms of not only this musical, but, like, just anything. Like, you think about, you put it away for a while, and you look at it again, you re-examine it, like, you see it with completely fresh eyes, as if, like, you never saw it before, which I think is interesting. And, like, as you're diving back into it, I imagine you're, like, the headspace you're in now consuming is probably way different than the last time you had heard it, right?
I think if I would have listened to that a few months ago, I'd have been like, oh my gosh, you know, like.
Yeah.
But I was in a place where I was ready to see something old with fresh eyes.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, but how? So it's like you're looking at it now. You're like, this is interesting. Jesus said some pretty rad stuff. What do you think you would have? So like, go back to Emily as like pre-deconstruction. Like, do you just view it as interesting art, or is it as spiritual? Like, what do you view it as? Do you think then?
So what's interesting, I was doing a little bit of research. I meant to do more before today, but I wanted to do some research on the musical, and there was a lot of controversy because it's kind of a 70s hippie show. Yeah. And people were kind of like, you're not being true enough to the actual gospel or the actual story of Jesus. And so when I saw it, I was still like fundamentalist, and I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, I can't quite remember. I think I was just like, yeah, this is neat, but missing some big theological points, maybe. I was probably hung up on that.
Yeah, I think I remember when I watched it at Westminster, I heard some of those rumblings from like other people. Like, this is like a really cool like play, but just make sure you know that it's not like the full story, right? Or this isn't a great theological, where it's like not a great work or whatever.
Right. And so I think they were like, this is like the story of Jesus, but this isn't like the gospel, if that kind of makes sense. And that's kind of where I was at, but at the same time, but you know what's so interesting is I was sitting next to my Nana, and she was like, this is like the Jesus I can get on board with. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, like, close, but like, you know, like, but I think right on the money. Like, I was like, this presents Jesus in a way that's like, yeah. Shout
out Nana, friend of the pod.
Shout out Nana.
I would say like that, and we can keep talking about the musical if you want, but I do think it's an interesting space that I've at least observed sitting across from you here and just walking another space with you in life. Like, it seems like you're more I don't know if interested the right word, because I don't know that you've been disinterested,
right, but
more inclined to like allow yourself to engage in things that are either super spiritual or pseudo spiritual, or like in the sense of it, like just to like, there was a season months ago, wherever you were just like, I don't need any of it.
Right.
I don't need my Bible. I don't need Christian music. I don't need things that are going to like stir me theological. Like, you were still having philosophical conversations.
Yes. But
like, you weren't that interested in faith conversations. And now it's like, I don't think you've answered all the questions you've had. It doesn't seem like you've moved into a place of like ultimate levels of certainty, but it has been really interesting. And I think from my perspective, at least, cool to see you like, you have more stamina to engage things that maybe you didn't have the stamina for before.
I really think stamina, or like being energized, like, is the right word there. Like, I just feel like so much of, I think this season that I like took a break, how we talked about like putting the box of operation away was like very real, and I really needed that. And it's been cool to like come out of the break and be not burnt out and be like excited to enter back in versus just being exhausted and overwhelmed and frustrated. And so like I think there was value in the like quote unquote break time, but it also has been, and the break aligned with some things in life also that were taking my energy in a lot of ways. But like I just feel like entering back into a place where I have more margin and more energy and stamina to like enter back into that and really think about it. It's the thinking about that stuff has like always brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would like, we've not dove into this topic or concept a ton, but like also like it's in some ways I would like classify, and you talked about the wilderness a second ago, like it seems like you've kind of been in that wilderness area, which is not bad like at all. Like there's so many good things that happen for like Jesus and the Israelites as they're in the wilderness and whatnot, but it's not a space of great rejuvenation, right? Like Jesus came out of the wilderness like exhausted, right? And like the Israelites entered the promised land exhausted from having been in there, but they entered spaces that were more life-giving where they were able to get that stamina. And I would say like for you, it seems like wilderness, I don't love the term because it makes it seem like you're like, at least maybe I perceive this, like if someone said, Danny, you're in the wilderness, I'd naturally be like, well, you're saying like I'm not smart or I'm wandering. Like I get like very directional about it, like I don't know where I'm going. But that's not necessarily how I view the biblical wilderness, because it wasn't just about like directional orientation. It was about like a time of purposely being disoriented in some ways, right?
Yeah, so to me, I actually was thinking about how much I like the term wilderness because it feels very morally neutral. It's not like, wow, that's so wrong of you to be in the wilderness. Like, no one would say that. It's just like, okay, that's like the space you're in right now. And there's really difficult parts of that and places where you're kind of stressed and freaking out, right? But but like it's not wrong necessarily. But I also think this is maybe I'm gonna go with it.
I like it.
Like I think the idea of wilderness. There's a book that I think I would still recommend, Leaving Egypt by Chuck DeGroat, and he talks about the idea of the wilderness and like and he goes through like exile or like slavery, exile, wilderness, whatever, promised land, the last one. And the wilderness is like it's also a place though where you're like you don't have direction and it's kind of a holding waiting ground. If you think about the Israelites, they were just vibing for 40 years.
Yeah.
And they were just like they weren't really on a journey. They were just kind of there and barred from like the promised land.
Right.
But that was a time that like obviously I wasn't there. They probably wouldn't appreciate me saying this, but like I feel like that was also a space where their like hearts were like prepared and grown, and like a space in each of their hearts was fostered to go to the promised land and be excited and thankful instead of being burnt out, because they were just like this again, like, you know, like it was really a beautiful thing, and they were so exhausted from like going through a bunch of BS that they were just like, okay, there's some like giants in the promised land or whatever. Not giant.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the VeggieTales.
No. Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Like even in terms like of your journey and like and one of the things I say when I like talk about the wilderness in terms of like preaching on like how quickly they were like, let's go back to slavery and captivity in Egypt, right? And then also, so it's like that's right into the wilderness. And the other side, they're like, well, maybe we don't want to go into the promised land because there are these people that could defeat us, and so we don't want and they don't believe the promise. And like I look at your story and like I've seen like different mimickings of those things, and it's just been interesting to like witness.
That's killer.
Yeah.
Because like there were moments in the wilderness where I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just go back. Like, and you were like, that was the last thing I thought you would say on this podcast. But I was just like, I'm just tired and I'm just like, don't want to think about it anymore. And that would be an easy way to get out of this.
Yeah.
Like, I relate to all those pieces of it.
Yeah. Well, so this is kind of a check-in, but as we like kind of keep marching down things, like, is there any like just to take some of what we're talking about and like checking in with like you spiritually, like where you're at, like, or emotionally or deconstruction, whatever,
right?
Like just for that part of kind of what we're doing to keep that as a portion of it. Like where are you? How are you doing? Like what's going on in the scheme of life for you? In faith and
in the scheme of life and faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. I feel like we've already kind of said it, but like that sounded really passive aggressive.
Well,
I didn't mean to.
You're kind of being an idiot, right?
Sorry. Like, but I think I'm sorry.
I'm not crossing my arms because I'm being
Like
defensive right now.
like a place of just like being more excited and willing to enter into this space. And I just feel very strongly that this summer is going to be a great summer. Like, I'm just going to like get to like think a lot and have a lot more time to process and do things that like fill me up.
Yeah, and I think we said this last week, actually, like, this is your first summer after working full-time, too, even though you're doing summer school.
Right.
But it's like, there has to be a little bit of, like, you haven't fully exhaled yet, but you're, like, anticipating.
We're so close.
That feeling of being like, I'm done.
Right. Like, when you say, like, what's going on with Emily right now, I'm like, I'm just trying to get through. Like, next week is finals. Like, we're so close. By the time this comes out, I think finals will be over.
Yep.
Yeah, wild. By the time this is out, summer break. Except I'll be at summer school.
So not summer break. But summer school's shorter, right?
Yeah, and it's only until like 1:30.
Yeah.
So it'll be a party. But but I would just say that like I'm just in a place where I feel more refreshed. I think I'm actually gonna start reading the Bible again.
Hey.
Wild.
Here's an interesting question.
Okay.
For you, but for maybe someone listening, like, so you're going to do that. Where does one start when they pick up the Bible and start reading?
I've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah.
So, okay. One, before I begin, I'm going to reread some books that really helped my view of the Bible, i.e., What is the Bible by Rob Bell and Inspired by Rachel Held Evans. I also ordered a new book called God Breathed. And it was, that's not what it's called. I don't know. But it's like, what does it actually mean that the Bible is God breathed? Like, it just, and Peter Enns' What is the Bible actually about or something?
Yeah, I can't remember what his is called, but it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Books that kind of challenge the, like, very fundamentalist idea of the Bible is something that really helps me, like, prepare to enter into the Bible because otherwise I get really, like, this is how it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to do some podcasting during that season just to see like what stirred up, like to see, because I imagine too there will be some exciting things you uncover and as you read things and it's like you see it with new eyes, but it will be interesting to be like to catch yourself maybe as you fall back into the old ways of reading it too, which maybe isn't entirely bad, but just to like as you're trying to put on a new set of readers to dive into the Bible, like it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
I think I'm gonna read the Gospels and then, but like once I hit Acts, pop back over to Genesis and do that. Like, I think that's a good refresher of like, okay, what does Jesus say? Like, what did Jesus do? But then also, like, I'm a very big believer that like the drama of Scripture is like from Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah.
And so I also think it's important to read it fully in that way.
I dig it.
TBD, but yeah.
That's a question I get asked a lot is like if I'm going to start, like where do I start? And so I think it's just interesting to like process and like, because I imagine there's some people listening that are like, hey, I want to do that too, or maybe they'll join over the summer and like take the challenge up with you too. But I think
I can like write out what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of fun.
That's cute.
But I think some people are like, where do you start? Do you start in Genesis? That's the first book. Do you start in the Gospels because that's the story of Jesus? And especially if you're evangelical, it's like the Old Testament is just kind of there and all that matters is the Gospels, right?
But there's so much Old Testament context in the Gospels that just make it so much more vibrant. But
correct, yeah.
But I will also say I'm reading it alongside someone who hasn't read the Bible before, which I actually think is perfect because it will help me like kind of see it through fresh eyes maybe and not be like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm excited to read the Bible with you this summer. It's going to be pretty cool. Thank you.
That was good.
Thanks.
Okay.
I've been told that before about myself, so I thought I'd make a joke about it.
Have you heard of the Bible,
yeah.
honestly?
Okay. All right, so that's where you're at. You're doing well. I think you've got some notes for us.
I do. So yeah, I posted on our Instagram like to send us questions, and for real, if you're listening to this, like please send us questions. We really like this being a consistent aspect.
I think we're gonna make that a more like common thing of just like making it like putting in our stories. It's one of the things when we talked with Tim from the New Evangelicals, he was like that was one of the best things he ever made a decision to do was like just post stories to get people to like respond to them. And I think that's definitely something we will commit to doing over the summer is like let's post more stuff to hear what people are thinking, like questions to engage that we dive into here on the pod.
Absolutely. So today I'm going to be reading this question from Be the White Chick.
Okay.
It says, How do you date after leaving a church where you could only date in that church?
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when you were at any of the churches you were at,
Right.
like, because I don't, so at least for me, I'll say I didn't never have that pressure, like growing up in the seasons I was in the church. Like, I mean, my first wife wasn't a Christian until I met her. I mean, she had gone to some FCA stuff when she played college sports, but I even didn't get a lot of pushback from like my Southern Baptist church I was working at. They were like, "Oh, she seems like a great person."
That's
Little
interesting.
do they know, but
Hope she doesn't listen.
yeah, bleep that out maybe, but
It was a joke.
actually don't, because it'll make it seem like I said something worse. So don't bleep it out.
Bleep it out, and then we'll be like, guess in the comments what Danny said about his ex-wife.
Man, this is a fun one.
This is fun.
But I never got any pushback for that. I mean,
Okay.
and like, I actually thought, I mean, this was working in church, so it's a little different. Like when I was a youth pastor, like I dated someone who went to my church, and I thought it was the weirdest experience. I mean, she
Right.
was a fine person, but like it was a weird dating experience because like everyone was in our business. And so
I can't imagine.
I think being a pastor maybe makes it with different lenses. But for you, like, what was that? Like, did you have that tension of like, hey, you got to date only Presbyterian? I mean, you dated the non-denom guy and you felt tension about it, right?
Yeah, the amount of pushback I got for that. But like so it's kind of interesting because I got both. I feel like they were like, you should meet a nice PCA boy, but at the same time it was like there's not that many PCA boys, so like you should be willing to go outside of that.
Right.
Which, so I was getting like both of those, and so I'm like, and then I went outside of it and everyone's like, oh my gosh, like I had a friend one time be like, do you think someone who believes in like infant baptism could marry someone that believes in believer's baptism? And she was like, I think it'd be hard. I was like, I think it'd be fine. I really do. Because people who believe in infant baptism also believe in believer's baptism. Anyway, that's really a side note. But that's where I was at.
Yeah.
And all that to say, there was this tension of like, you're not putting yourself out there enough, but also like don't put yourself too far out there when you're not in the circle of who's appropriate to date.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that put a lot of weird stress on church, honestly, of like, okay, am I like flirting enough with the people that I'm like supposed to be?
Yeah.
And I was like checked in about that. Like, hey, like, have you been flirting with the guys? Like, it was kind of a lot.
Yeah, so I'm actually just like, it took me back to when I was in college.
Yeah.
There was a college ministry like everyone went to. John Mark Comer, you know him?
Yeah.
So his church was like a big thing. And before it was like known as what it is now, like they started a thing, I think it was called The Way. And it was like a Wednesday night thing for young adults. And it was just a place for people to go to meet people to date. Like, is what it felt like.
Oh, yeah.
And I, like, just as you're talking, like, flooding back to there, like, this whole, like, hey, like, it was for guys. It was like, find the woman that you're going to find. And, like, women were, like, trying to be the most presentable. Mm-hmm. And, like, his theology is, and he has some good stuff. So I don't want to, like, say I don't love all the stuff he's put out. And I definitely don't love all the stuff he's put out. But, like, he definitely kind of perpetuated, like, the biblical man and woman roles and like that kind of stuff. And so like it was a place where like you'd get pretty solid teaching and that kind of stuff, but it seemed like it was designed to like meet people. And part of it was it would say from the stage with stuff about, which I agree with, like the idea of like being equally yoked and like finding people that you agree with and that are in your group. And there's tension. We were talking before we started recording about the thing that I saw with Mark Driscoll talking about like certain things with dating and whatnot. And so like I think there's a lot in that. But I don't know that I mean, what was the question was like, how do you date
after you've only been dating in the church?
I think it's easy. Like you find people to date, but I think it's harder. Like, I think it's weird to only think that you can date people that are at your church.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't date people that have similar values that are guiding their life. And that, but if it's just, especially because most churches are like 200 people or less, like that's a weird like thing to be in. But, yeah, I don't know. I think the larger question, I guess, is like, how do you navigate? And maybe that's not what they're asking, but do you only date people that are within the same faith tradition as you?
I think she's like, so that there was like a very specific dating culture, like kind of like you wait for a guy to ask you out and you just like try to look hot at church, right? And then you just hope like the leader, the spiritual leader asks you out, right? And notices you.
Can you pause for a second?
Yeah.
Is that like, so how much is that happening? Like, are people like getting asked out at church? Like, hey,
Right.
is that happening?
No,
Okay.
no. But every week we like failed if we didn't get asked out. This is like pretty deep. Like
No wonder every Presbyterian thinks they're a failure. If they, like,
well, I very much think that singleness in the church is like, we should do a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
Is just so looked down upon. And I remember like every single time we would talk about any single person in the church, it would be like, yeah, like I wonder like what's wrong with them. Like for real. And I'm just like, bro, maybe they haven't like found the right one yet, or like maybe they don't want to. Like there's so many different things.
or it's something wrong with other people and not wrong with them, right?
But when you have that culture, then it becomes, if you say like, oh man, I'm like sad about being single, then people just start to be like, well, like let's think about what we could, make better about you. And that is like, that's not really what I wanted to hear when I was already kind of feeling down.
Turns into like a She's All That situation, right?
I've never seen that.
What? Have you seen She's All That? Great movie. Go watch it.
Okay.
Recommendation station.
Okay. But I think what I would say is like, it sounds like she came from a pretty traditional upbringing if they were like only allowed to date in the church.
Yeah.
And very much so that's like the woman absolutely can't initiate anything. Like that is seen as like I read a book by Elizabeth Elliot called Passion and Purity. Elizabeth Elliot, she said some cool things. That book's pretty intense.
Yeah.
She was like,
Sounds intense.
she was like, I guess a woman can ask a guy out, but I just don't think it's God's best for you. And I was just like, all right. And she was like, and I think years down the road, he will resent you for that.
Oh, gee.
Because
God
like,
will or
the man.
Oh, the man.
Not God. But anyway, it was to like, but we were reading that. Me and my friends were like reading it and we were like, okay. Like we were.
Like, this checks out.
Right. Or just like, man, that kind of challenged me, but I need to listen to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that to say, I think when you kind of leave church, and even if just like you like, like microdose leaving church, right? Like, it's like you're just kind of a little bit like looking outside.
I love that.
There is a little more like, okay, like what can I do? Like what is dating culture outside of the church? It's very different.
We're titling this episode Microdosing Church.
No, microdosing leaving the church.
Yeah.
Or no.
I need to write that
church. Down.
Okay. We have so many good ideas for titles and I forget them and I have to go back, which is not a bad thing, but listen to the whole episode and I'm like, what was that funny thing we said?
Yeah.
So now I'm writing
Love it. All that to say, I think it's hard to navigate, but I think also it's okay to like go on bad dates and like just try things and see if they work for you.
Yeah. I think
that's what I did. I went on a lot of bad dates and then I was like, all right, this is dating.
Yeah. Yeah. From my perspective, like, cause I've worked, and it happened more as a youth pastor, like less now that I'm a lead pastor, but like I had lots of like times where like people in the congregation come like, hey, we need to like preach about singleness, or like we need like, or people that are single being like, hey, like even in like a church like the Gathering, which is like a more progressive church, like it feels marginalizing to be single and like have a sermon series on marriage and dating or whatever. And there's some of that narrative around, but I think like just from hearing what you're saying and from my own like feelings and experience growing up, I think the church makes dating, especially for women, really hard. Like especially 100%. If you're trying to find someone that is in the same tradition as you. And I think I don't like, maybe you disagree with this or agree with it, but like, I think for her, this person, like finding whatever ways you can hold to the same level of like, here's what I want for someone, but just, and this is easier said than done, but trying to like strip away some of that extra like tension and pressure that the church puts on you. Cause I even say like churches I've worked in, I think we've unintentionally put pressure on people, men and women alike, during dating probably.
Yeah.
But I think there are certain churches that intentionally put pressure on you. And it's like, once you get outside of that, it's like, even kind of like you diving back into the Bible, it's like you have to have new glasses on.
Yeah.
And it's like taking away some of those old ways you viewed what is good and what is right and what I need, so that you can start to define that for yourself. And maybe it's the exact same thing, but it's like letting you be the creator of that is an important step in the process, I think.
And one, like, this is very tangible, and not everyone vibes with this, but, like, one thing for me was, like, online dating, because I feel like in the church there, like, at least used to be, I still think kind of is. I remember I heard a pastor be like, yeah, you can online date, but it sounds like you're not really trusting God to like help you find your spouse. And I was like, well, that feels like we can't.
But that's probably only like a statement to the women, right? Because it's like you're not like how would that not be trusting God?
Right. Because you're taking control into your hands and
Right,
trying to find a spouse on your own.
But like in general, that's what dating is trying to find a spouse on your own.
Right. But it's like he's supposed to pop up out of thin air and you're like, and start pursuing you. Oh my God. Did you ever, were you like, man, I just really want to like pursue you and pursue your heart.
Yeah.
So like, that was
this
a lot.
This episode brought to you by plentyoffish.com.
No, but like for real, online dating, it was something that had so much stigma and I felt a lot of shame about it at the beginning. And it can be a wild place. It can be some wilderness, but also like my like last 2 serious relationships I've met them online, and I think there can be a lot of good. And I don't think it's you not trusting God.
Yeah,
that's a very tangible way to me to like dip your feet in if you're not sure what dating outside the church looks like.
Yeah, as this is not helpful to anything that we've talked about, but I will say when I dove back into the dating scene. One of the least attractive dating profiles is single dad pastor. People are just like,
really?
I'm going to just keep passing on this. I mean, the people that swiped right on me were into it. But
I feel like on Christian Mingle, that would be like, woo.
Yeah, I never did Christian Mingle,
right.
but it was funny. Like I would match with some people, and I would watch. Like you could almost see them like see my and be like, oh, that was an accident. Like I just saw the first picture, and then I'm like, the next one has a kid in it. Get me out of here. So all right, well, I think that was a good kind of conversation around this person's note. And again, like I think DM us at our email, which is deconstructionzonepod@gmail.com, or on any of our social medias, just DM us there, and like we'll throw more stuff on our stories, I think, so people can reach out.
And I will also say like it is helpful if you maybe like write out a full question.
Yeah.
Just so that we know exactly like what you're wanting to know versus like just a topic.
And even if like someone reaches out like this, I mean, we can make a point to like DM them back and get more context for it too. Like, and just be like, hey, like what's going on? Like I actually didn't even know we got response on our story. You pulled it. And so I have to do a better job diving in there to see that. I don't go into our Instagram a ton. So
we should just send her the link to this episode when it comes out with no context. Yeah. Listen to it. It's for you. Want to know. Okay. Recommendation.
I am currently reading.
I didn't do the song. Recommendation zone.
Did you see I put out on TikTok?
Yeah.
Got like 5 views. One of the lowest views I've ever got.
Me singing VeggieTales though skyrocketed.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you want to write us a song based on Emily check-ins, email corner, and recommendation zone. Let us know.
That's a great idea.
Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. 3 chapters in, and there you included, but there's other people in my life that are just going through like really hard things right now. And one of the things we've talked about is like how could a good God allow bad things to happen, or is God just like checked out, right? And I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed it. Also, C.S. Lewis is equally parts a great theological mind and just so hard to read. Like he does not talk like a normal human. And like this book did not come out that long ago.
Right.
And I'm like, please talk like a normal person.
But it feels like you're reading something ancient.
Yeah, and very scholarly.
Yes.
Which is funny because his like preamble is like, I'm not a scholar. And I was like, bro, you're pretty smart. But I'm really, really digging it. I avoided that book all through my life. I don't think I've ever read it before. And I might have cracked it. But like I was just like not interested in like
in pain.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about it. Like the last time I remember seeing it, I was like, I don't need this. And it's been really, really interesting. And so I wanted to have it finished before today's episode, but I'm like into the third chapter. So, but it's been really, really good. I would recommend it though. Thus far, like I think it's been a really, really good read. It's dense, but it's good.
Follow up. Did you read Screwtape Letters?
I'm like into that too. I haven't finished it yet either.
Okay,
but
I didn't know if you were like on a C.S. Lewis kick.
I am on a C.S. Lewis kick, but I'm like, so there's a podcast listening to these guys recommend books. And they record weekly, and like read this book, and I was like, how did you do that? I'm such a slow reader. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah.
And I'll get some shit for this, but Problem of Pain is on Audible, so I'm listening to that one. Screwtape Letters I'm reading, but a lot
of the books I recommended have been audiobooks.
Oh, great.
I'm a big audiobook
gal. That makes me feel better.
I think it's pretty like What about blind people?
Yeah, I can just bust through them so much. Like I'm on the road. What about dumb? I'm on the road so much. Like
Me too.
It's like it just makes like I can read so much fast, and I'm all done with all of my podcasts by today. So Wednesdays when we're recording, I'm all done with them all. So it's like midday Wednesdays. Like I'm in the car, I gotta listen to something. So it's been great.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I always have a new audiobook going.
Yeah.
My recommendation is
Godspell.
No, I mean definitely, but the one that I thought of was 8th Grade. Have you seen that movie?
I think isn't that the one like that's like really intense?
Yeah.
I think or no, it's like
I mean it's kind of
13.
intense.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
It's written and directed by Bo Burnham.
100% haven't seen this one.
Okay.
Different than I thought.
So I host Movie Monday every Monday at my house, and long story short,
I think on our Patreon, people should get an invite to Movie Monday. I'm just saying. Like if you subscribe, Zoom? No, I think they should come to your house.
They can come to my house. Everyone, you're allowed to invite friends.
Sorry,
We'll pay for your plane ticket to come to Movie Monday. But please join the Patreon. Perfect.
What a deal.
After 100 years, we can pay for your flight. Yeah, so we were going to watch something else, but then, like, not a lot of people came, and so I was like, I'm not feeling like doing the movie. I had pre-selected, and so we picked this one, and it was an all-girl group, and the movie follows a girl in 8th grade, and I remember sitting there and being like, this movie, each scene in this movie is all of the moments in middle school that we thought we were the only ones experiencing. And it's just, there's something really cool about how it's created and how it makes you feel like, oh, like this is just what 8th grade is like. Like it's right on the money in so many ways. Particularly for girls, I don't know, but I just really enjoyed it and I thought I would share that.
I dig it. 13. Is it on Netflix?
8th grade.
8th grade, sorry.
It's on HBO Max.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
I'll watch it.
You should watch it.
Well, cool. Well, for us as we wrap up, any final thoughts, words you want to send us out with?
Final thoughts? Honestly, no.
Okay.
I would no. Okay, I got something. Like I would just say, do things that energize you because being able to have margin and energy again has just been really beautiful.
I love that.
Do you have anything?
I just have for people to embrace the journey.
It's never you saying
It's never me. It was today, though.
Took my line.
You think after like 48 weeks, you know that I'm going to ask you what your final line is.
Right. And I'm always like, oh, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants.
That's funny. All right. We did it.